Sanhedrin, Daf Mem Aleph Amud Beis and Mem Beis Amud Aleph. Overcoming despair, Elmali lo zachu Yisrael. Looking at a snapshot of reality doesn't give one a sense of reality and can lead one either to delusion or to despair. If you take a snapshot of the stock exchange when it's at its highest, then everything looks wonderful. You get into a state of delusion, thinking it's always going to be that way. If you take a snapshot when it's down below and a lot of loss has taken place, then one gets negative and one gets despairing. It's only when you look at the trajectory that you can understand the cycles of whether it's the economy or it's the climate or whatever. If you take a long shot and you're able to see a trajectory of movement, then you can understand it's not so serious. There have been cycles of weather over the centuries. It gets hotter, it gets colder. If you just take a snapshot of a short period of time, it looks very scary what's happening to the climate. The longer you take the perspective and you can understand trajectories, you can turn despair into faith, not hope. Hope is something very nebulous. Although we have an idea of hope, we have such an idea of hope, but hope is a bit nebulous. We talk about bitochen. Faith is certainty. Hope is maybe things will come right. Faith is things will come right. And how can you know that things will come right? Because you understand the trajectories, you understand the cycles, and just as day follows night, so renewal follows despair, and that's part of the understanding of Rosh Chodesh. The sugya that we're dealing with deals with Birkat HaChodesh, with Kiddush HaChodesh that we say on Motzei Shabbos after Rosh Chodesh every month. That's what the sugya deals with on the surface, but if we look at the sugya deeper down, we'll understand that the sugya is dealing with despair and faith. Omer Rabbi Acha bar Chanina, the sugya is divided into two pieces. Two statements of Rabbi Acha bar Chanina in the name of Rabbi Yochanan. The first one is, Ad kama mevarchim al HaChodesh, until when can you say Kiddush HaChodesh? Often, if there's been some cloudy days in Shul on Motzei Shabbos, there's always a bit of, can you still say it? Can you still say Kiddush HaChodesh? Until when? Ad shetitmale pegimata. Rabbi Yochanan says, until the hollow of the moon has filled out. The pigima of the levana is filled out. The kama, how long is that? So we have two views. Omar Rabbi Yaakov bar Idi, Omar Rabbi Yehuda ad Shiva, Hadoi Omar ad Shisho Asa. One says 7 days into the month, and one says 16 days into the month. And the Machlokes is Tarvaik Rabbi Yochanan Tzviru. They both agree with Rabbi Yochanan that it's until ad shetit male pigimata. Halemevi ki yitra, halemevi ki nafio. The question is, does filling out mean a semicircle so that the gap is filled out and now the circle is straight on the side? There's no concave shape to the moon? Or does filling out the gap mean a full moon? If it means a full moon, then after the 15th you can no longer say Kiddush Levana. If it means that the line is now straight, then from 7 days you can no longer say it. Amale Rav Achami Difti Ravina. So Rav Achami Difti asked Ravina, I understand there's a question of Kiddush HaChodesh. How long until when can you say Kiddush HaChodesh, which celebrates the Chidush HaLevana, the newness, the renewal of the moon? But Livri Chatov HaMeitiv, what's wrong with looking at the moon and seeing the light is increasing? If you're looking at the trajectory and you see every night there's more light, why not say Hatov HaMeitiv? The Rebbeinu Shem is giving us more light. We're getting benefit from the light at night. Why can't we say the bracha that we say for good things? Hatov HaMeitiv. Omaleat tu ki chaser mi mevarchin dayan ha'emet. So what are you going to say? When the moon gets smaller, you've got to say Baruch Dayan ha'emes. So the Gemara links Tov HaMeitiv to Baruch Dayan ha'emes. Delivery Hatov HaMeitiv, that you should make a Tov HaMeitiv. Says the Gemara, why not? So say both. Say Baruch Dayan ha'emes when the moon gets smaller, and say Hatov HaMeitiv when it gets bigger. Kivan dahainu chelo mevarchina. If you look at the trajectory, you realize this is nature. This is the algorithm of nature. It gets small, it gets big, it gets small, it gets big. Nothing to get excited about. No Baruch Dayan ha'emes and no Tov HaMeitiv. This is just natural. It's interesting. I think this actually bears into a conversation that's been going on among poskim in Eretz Yisrael recently about what brachas do the hostages make and what brachas do the families of the hostages make and what brachas can we make when the hostages come out? And one of the questions is at least Hatov Ha'ametiv. Can you say Hatov Ha'ametiv? Well, good news, you've heard that the hostages are coming out. And when one hears the news and we're sure of it, we see it on TV that they're out and they're safe, should we say Hatov Ha'ametiv? I would argue, according to this Gemara, you cannot say Hatov Ha'ametiv because we never gave up hope. Baruch Dayan Emes means it's overs. And that's what the Gemara is saying. You didn't say Baruch Dayan Emes when the moon was getting small, so you don't say Hatov Ha'ametiv when it's getting bigger. Because Baruch Dayan Emes is the bracha you say when you've given up hope. There's no more hope, it's the end. And you say Baruch Dayan Emes, we accept the judgment. You don't say Baruch Dayan Emes when you still have faith that it's going to come right. And since we never gave up faith that the hostages would return, and look what happened every week, every day, the protests and the demands and the expectations and the tefillot that we were all saying all the time, we never gave up hope. We never said Baruch Dayan Emes. If we didn't say Baruch Dayan Emes, you don't say Hatov Ha'ametiv. It's our expectation. We expected them to come home. We wanted them to come home. It's like the moon. It's an interesting piece of Gemara on what's happening at the moment. So that's the Gemara that Baruch Dayan Emes is a sign of despair. Tov Ha'ametiv is a sign of I had despaired and it turns out I was wrong. It's all wonderful. Everything's good. Then another statement of Rav Acha bar Chanina, Omer Rav Asi, Omer Rabbi Yochanan, and this is not just because it's the same person making a comment in two different places. There's a theme here. Kol ha'mevarech al hachodesh bizmano ki'ilu mekabel pnei shechina. We say this in the Kiddush Halvana itself. When you're saying Kiddush HaChodesh, this is a very important tefillah. When you say Kiddush HaChodesh, it's as if you're receiving the Pnei HaShechina. It's as if the Rebbeinu Shalom's come to town, and you're going to see, when a Hasidic Rebbe comes to town and they have a Melava Malka for him, it's packed out. If a Rosh Yeshiva comes to town, it's not quite as packed out, but still a lot of people will go as well. If a Torah Tainer comes to town, then it's totally packed out. What would happen if the Shechina came to town? I'm not so sure what would happen. I wish I could say it would be packed out. Not sure.
What you're serving with this.
So it depends what you're serving with the Shechina. Yeah, what are you offering? What are the refreshments people are going to want to know? But assuming that Pnei HaShechina, we would go crazy to receive the Pnei HaShechina, that's what we do when we're doing Kiddush HaChodesh. Tivach HaChodesh Tivatam Zeh Livan Veyu, we have a Gzera Shova, and that's where we learn it from. Tana de Rabbi Yishmael, Ilmali lo zachu Yisrael ela lakbil Pnei Avim shebashamayim kol chodesh v'chodesh dayam. If that's the only mitzvah we had, it would be enough. We could serve Hashem with this one monthly mitzvah. That's enough to be able to connect closely to Hashem. You can connect to Hashem with this mitzvah alone. That's how great this mitzvah is. That's why you've got to stand for Kiddush HaChodesh. You can't sit down. That's why you've got to say it standing up. That's the piece of Gemara. Rashi says, this that you've got to be standing for Kiddush HaChodesh, says Rashi, is because you are receiving the Shechina. The Shechina comes into the room. What, you're going to be sitting down? Of course you're going to stand up. That's the Shechina is there. Not because the moon is the Shechina chas v'sholom, but there's something about it. We'll see in a moment what that is, that you're receiving the Shechina. The Yad Ramah says it a little bit differently, and he says, Kivan de chashiva hai bracha kuli hai bai bruchim umad. It's not that you're being mekabel the Pnei Shechina. It's just, if we're willing to say that this is as if Tana de Rabbi Yishmael says, this is as if you're receiving the presence of Hashem, such an important bracha you stand for. It's the importance of the bracha. It's not the Shechina which causes you to stand up. It seems as if Rashi and the Yad Ramah are saying two things that are slightly different. But if we learn that Rabbeinu Yonasan Milunil, Rabbeinu Yonasan lived between Rashi and the Yad Ramah. He was in the time of the Rambam. Rabbeinu Yonasan Milunil had a lot of correspondence with the Rambam. He was in Provence, part of that wonderful Beis HaMedrash we've talked about, the Beis HaMedrash of the Raivid, the Baal HaMor, a very innovative Beis HaMedrash in the south of France. And he was part of that, but he was a big supporter of the Rambam. And in fact, it was he who had the Moreh Nevuchim translated into Hebrew. The Rambam originally wrote it in Arabic, and he asked the Rambam for a copy. The Rambam sent him a copy, and he took the copy to Shmuel ibn Tibbon, and Shmuel ibn Tibbon translated it into Hebrew. So he was involved in that. It's a beautiful Rabbi Yonasan Milunil. V'atam, what is this? It's like the Shechina. Lefi shelo nish'ar bimlechet hashamayim v'haaretz davar nikaru mufursan lekol mishu chacham lev u'lemí she'eino chacham lev sheyeh ha'olam nivra mizman mu'at v'lo haya kadmon. There is no phenomenon in science and in nature anymore that shows us clearly that the world was created by Hashem and that it didn't just come from nowhere. We don't really have. The renewal of the moon is one thing that gives us that feeling. By understanding the moon, you see that every month the Rebbeinu Shalom renews the moon, and it lets it go. He extinguishes it little by little, until it's completely dark. There's no moon at all. And this demonstrates that the Rebbeinu Shalom created the world from nothing and could return it to nothing at any moment that he wanted. And we've got to celebrate that. Just as when we get up in the morning, we shouldn't take it for granted. We've got up in the morning, every morning for years and years and years. What's this morning different from any others? We still say, we thank the Rebbeinu. We don't take it for granted. So with the moon, although every time it comes, it's a monthly thing, we shouldn't take it for granted and realize that Rebbeinu Shalom could decide to pause on the darkness and not renew the moon. And there won't be a moon. But he doesn't. He renews the moon each time, demonstrating to us his power to create from nothing. And if you praise the Rebbeinu Shalom about this element of the moon, by talking to Hashem and saying, thank you, Hashem, for bringing the moon back into light, you're demonstrating to the world that you believe and declare that Hashem runs the world and created the world. And that's all a human being has to do. And that's why it says that if this was the only mitzvah that we had, it would be sufficient. If a person really understands this and recognizes it, then you'll understand who the Rebbeinu Shalom is, and you won't move from his mitzvot. You'll have Yireh Shamayim. So just by doing Kiddush HaChodesh, you can get Yireh Shamayim. Now it's interesting, Rabbi Yonasan Mulunil wrote his work as a perush on the Rif. And he always bases his perush on Rashi. He learns Rashi together with the Gemara. That's his starting point. So it's likely that this too, he's explaining Rashi. This that Rashi said, Ho'ilu mekabel pnei Shechina, doesn't mean he's receiving the Shechina. It means by declaring a belief in Hashem's renewal of the world and his capacity to create from nothing. That's as if I'm mekabel the Shechina. I'm standing in front of Hashem. I'm saying, Hashem, you are present. That's what Rashi means. It's ki'ilu mekabel pnei Shechina, which is more aligned with what the Yad Ramah learns later on. And the Rabbeinu Yonasan is making more sense of understanding Rashi. The difficulty that I had with Rabbeinu Yonasan Mulunil is we've just learned that this is the way of nature, that we don't make a tov ha'metiv, we don't make a baruch dayan ha'emes. Why? Kivan dahainu urche lo mevachina. It's nature. It happens. So what is Rabbeinu Yonasan Mulunil saying? If you see the moon comes, the moon goes, the Rebbeinu Shalom could leave it could extinguish it, but he doesn't, he reignites it. So each time you see the Chidush HaOlam, what do you see Chidush HaOlam? You're just seeing nature in its normal pattern. You're looking at the trajectory. You're looking at the cycles. The moon gets bigger, the moon gets smaller, the moon disappears, the moon reappears. That's nature. We've just said that. Why is Rabbeinu Lunil now explaining the next piece by the same Amor of Omer Rabbi Yacha bar Chanina, Omer Rabbi Yasi, Omer Rabbi Yochanan, the same person says, oh, this is like receiving the Shekhinah. This is how important this is. Why is it like receiving the Shekhinah if it's just nature? Why is it more receiving the Shekhinah as it is to look at Mount Everest, or to look at the ocean, or to see a beautiful sunset? Why is Chidush HaLevana? Why is this anything more than any other act of nature, the way Rabbeinu Yonasan Mulunil sees it? I think that's exactly what Rabbeinu Yonasan Mulunil is saying. That to be able to see in the moon that the dark times are temporary, and the Rebbeinu Shalom is always present, even in the dark times, and it's going to get light again. Just that knowledge, removing despair, because despair is a form of kfirah. When we have despair, when we're depressed, it's a form of denial of Hashem. We feel depressed and despair when we feel disconnected from Hashem. But when we feel Hashem is with us, when we feel embraced by Hashem, and that's what Shekhinah means. Shekhinah means that Hashem is Shochein. He's there amongst us. He's living in our midst. When you feel that Hashem is in our midst, to feel when Hashem is in our midst, when everything's going well, that's not so difficult. To feel when Hashem is in our midst, when it's dark, for that, you've got to have faith. For that, you've got to look at the long-term trajectory and see how Hashem created the world and see all the algorithms and see the cycles and understand that life is cyclical. And yes, you're going through a hard time now. It will pass. And there will be better times ahead because that's the way history works. That's the way. Understanding that is Mekabel Pnei Shechina. To be in the darkness and believe in the light means you're seeing the Shechina in the very darkness. That's what Rabbeinu Yonah Samilaniel means. And we see that in the Marshal, though he doesn't reference Rabbeinu Yonah Samilaniel. And he says, Ve'esh Lomar, because they all battle with this Mekabel Pnei Shechina. We say it every Motzei Shabbos, and we don't kind of stop and say, what does this mean? We're just saying it every Motzei Shabbos. What does it mean? Kina Mekabel Pnei Shechina, not every Motzei Shabbos, once a month. Lefishi Yisrael begalutan einan zochin lirot Pnei Shechina uruchoka mikabalata. Because when the Israel are in the Golus, it's not so easy to feel Hashem's presence. Certainly in the difficult times, in the dark times of the Galut, it's not so easy to feel Hashem's presence. אבל חידוש הלבנה הוא סימן לישראל שהם עתידים להתחדש כמותה לפעל ליוצרם בקיבול פני שכינה כמו שיורה על זה נוסח ברכת הלבנה. By standing in Birkas Halavana and saying that what we're doing is we're recognizing and declaring, yes, we're in dark times, but you know what? A day or two ago there was no moon, and look at the beautiful new moon. And it happens like that every month. And we know it already. That's the way of Hashem. So to be in the Galut, distant from Hashem, but to feel Hashem's presence and realize you're just in a dark cycle. The sun has just dipped. It's just gone to sleep for the night. It'll be up in the morning again. The moon has just gone off. It's going to come back again. The difficult time for Klal Yisrael, we're just going through that difficult time. It will come right again. Business is tough. It will come right again. Things will turn around again. It's not this way forever. It's that faith which gives us the ability to invest in the future. You know, Warren Buffett's rule, when people are selling, it's a time to buy. When people are buying, it's a time to sell. But for that, you need faith. You need to believe in the future. You need to understand this is cyclical. Everybody else is selling. Why? Because they're in this delusional state. They're looking at a snapshot. And what do you see in the snapshot? You see terrible things going on around you. So you get into depression and into fear mode. That's the time to realize it's going to come right. And if it's going to come right, now's the opportunity. That's what faith is. That's what bitochen is. And it's interesting that that's why investment has always been strong in countries and civilizations that have faith in God. Where there's a belief in the Ribbono Shel Olam, there's been investment. And take places like Africa where it's not so, the Ribbono Shel Olam doesn't play such an important part in people's lives. It's more living in the present as if there is no future. It's about consumption. It's not about investment. The ability to invest is to take a view of the future, to understand the cycles, and that's what Kiddush Levana is, and that's why it's Ki'inu Mekabel Pnei Shechina, because the Shechina means feeling God's presence in dark times. That's what it really means. And that's why this whole piece of Gemara is about despair and the managing of despair through the understanding of faith in the cycles of the Ribbono Shel Olam's governing of the world. I found a sefer, the Imre Bina. The Imre Bina, what excited me about the sefer is what he wrote here. It just was so beautiful. But when I read his Hakdama, his introduction, to try and get to know him a little bit, because I'd never heard of him before, it's about 150 years ago, his Hakdama is so beautiful, and it kind of explains what he's saying here. He writes in his Hakdama that he was orphaned at 3. He was raised by his mother, and she was a wonderful woman. He writes a lot about his mother and how she raised him. And he was a very sad little boy. And he grew up sad. He grew up depressed. And she used to encourage him to learn Agadata, to learn the parts of the Gemara that are the narratives in the Gemara, to uplift himself, to find joy in the narratives of the Gemara. And when he became older, he started giving a shir between Mincha and Ma'ariv every day on Agadata. So on Ein Yaakov, he would give a shir on Ein Yaakov, take the Agadata from the Gemara, so as to uplift everybody. He realized he wasn't the only person who was miserable. And every day he would give a shir in Agadata, and that way it would be good for him and good for them. And on Shabbos, he would give a Medrash shir, like we do at KBA every Shabbos. Give a Medrash shir to uplift people. And during the time of giving the shiurim, he says a lot of chidushim came to him. So he wrote these chidushim down and he put them in the sefer. And I saw that the Netziv gives him a beautiful haskoma. So I realized this is somebody important. And he writes Abaya. This is Abaya who says this. Abaya is the one who says in Bava Metzia, Yeush shalom midayit Abaya ma lo havi yeush. That if you don't deliberately give up hope, it's not called giving up hope. Really, we have the idea of yeush, of despair, in the case of mitziot. If somebody has lost something and he's given up hope, then somebody else who finds it is entitled to have it. Because you've given up hope. That's the nature of giving up hope. You don't own it anymore. But Abaya says you have to deliberately give it up. It's not something you could do subconsciously. So now put this in the context of who he is. He's a man who suffers from depression. And he says, in order not to become depressed, min ha'geula, because things are rough, tzarich kol adam b'Yisrael lemeimra ulaha'id al davar ha'geula. Every Jew has to make a declaration once a month. I believe in the future. I believe these dark times are temporary. I believe in the cycles of nature. I believe in the moon coming and going. Ve'edim, and now a declaration like edus, tzrichim la'amod b'shad edutam. If you're making a declaration, you've got to stand. Hilkach tzarich lemeimra mu'umad dafka. This is not because, as the Rabbi Yonasan says, or Rashi says, or Rama says, because it's so important, you've got to stand up. It's not about the importance. It's about the nature of what you're doing. This is declaration. A declaration, you stand up on your feet and you make a declaration. Yes, things are tough and I believe in the future. Yes, everybody's selling, I'm buying. Everybody's running away from Eretz Israel, I'm going to Eretz Israel. You make a declaration, you stand on your feet. That's what it's Hilkach tzarich lemeimra mu'umod. Stand on your feet and make a declaration, because that's how you overcome depression and despair. And we say the posuk from Shir HaShirim about the Shechina that has appeared, and even though it's been away for so long, mitrapeket al doda, it remains connected and attached to its beloved. Ribono Shalom, we're in such hard times. We've seen you withdraw. The moon is gone. The night is dark. But we don't feel a detachment. We feel the attachment to you, and that's our declaration. We stand on our feet and we say, Mi zot olam min hamidbar mitrapeket al doda va'adayin chavivuteh hagaban. And we still have our love for you, and we still know that you have your love for us. V'lo yavo lidei yeush midat chas v'shalom v'hi ratzon shemale pigyat havana. Amen. Such a beautiful piece from a man who knows what despair is, from a man who knows what depression is. Get up on your feet and make a declaration in the darkest of times. I believe in the future.